Hi, this is Brian again, and a short recording on one of the other topics that we covered in class, but unfortunately because that recording session crashed, wasn't able to capture it. And so I'm going to try and share that with you now. What this was about is how digital payments that seem similar can be very different. So these are just three pictures that say we might have an experience of my sending some money from my smartphone to your phone, and punching up your contact information, sending you some information, perhaps having a biometric. And that all seems very similar if I use one payment mechanism or another. But in fact, what's going on underneath that can be significantly different. And the same when I'm in a store, I sweep my phone over the tap and pay device and kind of without a thought, am able to make my payment. But there's some meaningful differences, whether that payment is backed by something like a credit card or a Venmo or PayPal account or something like that. And the same, when making payments over the web or with a street vendor or all these other things, the gestures to outward appearance might be different. The gestures might be the same, but there's some meaningful differences. And those will depend upon whether the thing backing that swiping gesture is a debit card. Maybe the thing backing that swiping gesture with my phone in the store is a credit card. Maybe I'm using something that is not affiliated with a traditional bank, like a PayPal or a Venmo. Maybe I'm using something like WeChat Pay or M-Pesa. Each of these are different, even though the intention is to enable commerce, and some of the basic gestures may be the same. But especially in the context of thinking about how we might add a central bank digital currency to this mix, we should consider what some of those differences are. And so what are those differences? One of the basic differences is about fees and interest and charges and things like that. Basically, who is paying for this system is how. Modern credit card payments are built upon decades of experience with credit cards, and what's really funding the credit card system is people who have a balance on their credit card and they pay interest on that balance. Also, credit card transactions, typically the retailer pays to be able to collect your payment from credit card, whether it's a physical credit card or a tap and pay connected to a credit card. And the reason for that is they just as soon collect the money electronically and not have to collect all those euro notes and coins and take them down to the bank and deposit them. So those fees are very different than the fees for something like a Venmo or a PayPal, where they're often, you're taking your money out of the banking system and putting them into this alternate system, and you pay transaction fees getting in and out of that. In both of those cases, the credit card payments and the most common use cases of PayPal, there is a bank account involved. But for some digital payment mechanisms, there isn't a bank account. You can go to somebody like M-Pesa and hand somebody some cash. They load the value of that cash onto your phone. There's no savings account, no bank account, nothing like that involved. And so that helps make some these underlying payment systems behind that digital payment gesture more accessible to people who don't have bank accounts. The downside, though, is in much of the world, consumer protections are tied to things like bank accounts, checking accounts, debit cards, things like that. And the law hasn't, in many parts of the world, caught up with consumer protections for things that are divorced from that. So just like I can make a payment with my credit card using my physical credit card, I can use my phone to make a tap and pay. And if that's connected to my credit card, I have the same protections for dispute resolution and things like that that I would have had I used my credit card. However, if I take some money out of the bank and load it into some other kind of alternate payment system and connect my digital wallet to that, and then use my digital wallet to make a tap and pay, the consumer protections available to me as a part of the banking system aren't available because it took my money out of the banking system and put it into something else. So anyway, this was just the idea that um, when you make a tap and pay gesture, when you send somebody by some sort of payment messaging mechanism, when you pay electronically over the web directly or indirectly, the gestures of that might be very similar. Like I say, you pull your phone out, you tap it to the terminal, you walk away, but it actually makes a difference. What is the real payment thing behind that? And then what are some of those differences are about how it gets paid for, what kind of banking account or identity authentication is needed, and what kind of consumer protections. And so this is something that central bankers think about is how do they want to inject themselves or not into this landscape, and how do they want to preserve or intentionally disrupt some of the assumptions people would have. Anyway, we'll talk more about this in class, but this was just a short recap of what we covered in class, and I hope this was helpful. Thanks a lot.